Okay, I'm with Steve Lamb. Steve Lamb is a very, very active activist, traditionally progressive, but just informed me he switched to the dark side and became Republican. But which is a whole interesting story in itself. But Steve was a longtime panelist on my political talk show, The Koz Effect, where I tried to do a reverse Bill Maher, and I would be a Republican that had a wide ranging panel that would feature liberals a lot. And Steve is very uncategorizable, frankly. So he always brought interesting comments to the table. And so I'm asking him to talk about some of that. So Steve, how did we first get in touch? Was it because you were always I met you through the Pasadena Weekly?
Yeah. Yeah, we first met when you were a reporter at the Pasadena Weekly, and I don't honestly remember what story that was. But in my time, I was on something called the Altadena Town Council in those days, which was a deliberative body that represented the citizens of Altadena to the Board of Supervisors, because Altadena is an unincorporated county area. And I was generally fighting land use issues, gentrification, police brutality, all that kind of stuff that's normally identified with the left. Um, and so everybody, including myself, thought I was a leftist, although I always came from a very sort of American Federalist centered kind of viewpoint.
Okay. So I had you on the show,
Mm-hmm.
and you,
We've
I
known
mean,
each other
what
for,
was?
I don't know, 10 years or so before that.
Oh yeah, no, we did. Yeah, we knew each other for a while, but um, so what was your impression of being on the Cause Effect show? And do you feel that that doing a show like that, we never had a massive audience, which is part of the story of the documentary, but it's still, I think that we were having some pretty amazing conversations that you don't see on more popular media. Would you agree with that, or do you feel differently?
Well, no, I would agree with that. I think we had a lot of, in cases, they got to be very raw discussions about political issues. I think they were a lot more honest than anything else you see or hear on the media, where everyone's buttoned down and controlled and that sort of thing. I mean, Jasmine and I would occasionally really get into it, which was really funny because we were on the same side of most issues, but she didn't think I was left enough, and I didn't think she was nuanced enough. And so we got into lots of tiffs there. Uh, Dr. David Robinson, it was hard to tell where David was coming from because everything to him was a big effing joke. Um, but it was great. I met Jimmy Dore there, and Jimmy Dore came in as a guest once, and he was hilarious because he pretended like he couldn't even speak to me because I believed in Building 7, and I thought this guy was like some super anti-conspiracy theory jerk. And and it turns out, of course, he is like the biggest conspiracy theory dude right now on YouTube, but he was just basically putting me on to see, how much I knew and what I knew and if I was going to stick to my guns. It's really funny. But
So
it's Carl, because really you pioneered something that Clear Channel has picked up doing, only they don't do it as well as you did it. Clear Channel now has podcasts for all their radio hosts, right? But their podcasts are just an extension of their same boring ass shows. Your shows were really fascinating. I mean, here you were like this super conservative dude, right? But you had like, I don't know, you had like lesbians on who had their own shows, and you had like nuns talking about sex, and I mean, just all kinds of crazy shit you had on your programming. It was just really, really a wild thing. It's actually what we need more of. The, the real problem with media nowadays is that it's either people screaming over each other, like the whole Ben Shapiro effect. He's screaming over the Libby's, and then all the Libbies are screaming over him, and nobody ever seems to really just talk to each other in America anymore. And then, but the funny thing about that is that all the content, even though they're screaming over each other, is really boring, repetitive bullshit. And you had a lot of people who were talking about a lot of very interesting problems that everyday Americans face that we don't see in the media at all. There's like no space for that at all. There really is no space for like lesbians to have the lesbian love talk show like you had. I mean, it's here we have this conservative Polish Catholic kid, and he's like running the most free speech program there is on the radio. It was fantastic.
Thanks. Wow. So, well, one thing I always thought was most interesting, except I've got to make an extra push to get like Ted Lied, especially. I wrote him once, I haven't heard back, but is I thought we did a great job when it came to race, and I'm going to find August of 2014. We did some episode about Ferguson, Missouri, that was just off the hook amazing, I thought. And anyway, so that's an issue I thought we handled really well. Anything you want to comment about, racial issues from your time
Well,
there?
yeah, it's interesting. We almost had Patrice Cullors as a co-host. I tried to get Patrice on because she was a friend of mine. She was doing
Yeah.
Dignity and Power Now back then, right before Black Lives Matter started. And Black Lives Matter kind of actually started out of an email she sent around after Ferguson. And it's too bad she got so busy because she was almost on the show. Um, I don't think that there's really anybody who's sane who believes in racist policing. And I think in spite of the fact that we had like this huge spectrum of beliefs on your show, like nobody sat there and thought, oh, this is a good thing. I'm going to defend the police on this because so much of this is indefensible. And it's indefensible whether or not you come at it strictly from a racial aspect or whether you come at it from a constitutional law aspect, and of course, one of the problems I have with this whole discussion is it really isn't a black and white issue. It's a totalitarianism issue. There are twice as many white men killed by police every year as there are black men. Um, the police don't seem to kill as many Latinos as you would think they would, given the population and given the argument that it's supposedly a racist structure. And I think there are reasons for that deal with the police being an authoritarian, militaristic, totalitarian structure, as opposed to it merely being a racial issue. And we get into some of that, and of course, Ted and Jasmine were deeply offended. But
So, gosh, I don't know. Is there any other issue or memory of a particularly contentious episode or the one that you thought was surprisingly effective at finding consensus?
oh, I don't really remember the episodes specifically. A long time ago, and I've
Yeah.
it's been a crazy. It's been a crazy. It hasn't even been a decade, but it seems like it's been two or three of them. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was just a great show. I really, it's too bad that we didn't have a larger audience because I think, if we'd had a larger audience and if that program and programs like it had gotten more space, I think the country would look different. I don't think we would be as divided into hardened, warring camps as we are now.
Wow.
But we really did find a lot of common ground, and we found it early in that show that was in some ways shocking, you know. And I think if we had more avenues like the Cause Effect in the mainstream or even on the internet, I think, where people really just talked about the stuff in a raw kind of format, I think the country would be better off.
Okay. I'm gonna hit pause because I think I got
Okay, I'm gonna